there's an obvious need. I mean, to deny the fact that we need people to work who are from outside the country is just complete denial of reality, that there are not enough people in the United States who have legal status who want to do all of the work. So that needs to be done, particularly in manual labor jobs.
Welcome again to Chino y Chicano. I'm Enrique Cerna. Coming up, a conversation with Mike Gempler. He's the executive director of the Washington Growers League. It's a lobbying organization, nonpartisan, that represents growers throughout the state of Washington, their interests. Mike has been around a long time and knows what's happening, how the growers are dealing with issues, particularly during these times, questions about whether they're going to have enough farm workers available to do the work that they need to harvest the crops, how they feel about tariffs, just the concerns of being a grower in these times. And we're going to be talking to Mike about all the issues. Also, the concerns about the mass deportations, how that may be impacting the availability of farm workers to be available to pick the crops, the impact of tariffs, which seems to be going up and down and sideways all the time, and the need for comprehensive immigration reform. Also going to be talking to Mike about a comment made by the Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, who said that there's not going to be any amnesty for migrants and mass deportations will continue. She says that there are plenty of people, plenty of adults in America that are available out there, those that are on Medicaid. The only thing about that is that most of those people don't want to do that work. And to be honest, I don't know that they're capable of doing that work because being a farm worker is a tough job, working under tough conditions, and you have to have skills to be able to handle this type of work. All right, here's my conversation with Mike Gempler of the Washington Growers League. Mike Gempler, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. These are interesting times for farmers. And so in central Washington right now, what's the status of the workers, I guess, out in the fields, and for the farmers being able to get the workforce they need to bring in the crops, particularly now as the harvest is starting to come in?
Well, it's in flux, I guess, is a good way to put it. We're getting the cherries off, generally speaking. I know that there are some cherry growers at the beginning of the cherry season who were desperate for employees and couldn't find anybody. That, I guess, fixed itself over time as people who are here looking for cherry jobs who are undocumented and use false documents to get jobs. I think they had to see what the environment was like with regard to ICE enforcement. When they saw that there weren't a lot of raids in the fields, I guess they just came to work. And so there were enough to get the basic cherry harvest going. I know that there are some growers who are really short and are having great difficulty and are going to have to leave some cherries on the tree, which is a shame. The cherries are really beautiful this year. And so prices...
It's a good crop.
It's a great crop. It's a big crop. It's a good crop. It's very high quality, but the prices took a bit of a dive a week and a half ago, and so that's unfortunate. But I think a lot of the people who work in agriculture who do picking and harvesting, about half of them, just to use a very rough number, are supposedly undocumented. And according to the National Agricultural Worker Survey, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor, they hire a contractor to go out into fields and interview farm workers. Um, According to that NAWS, it is about 42% of the people working in crops in the United States are undocumented. If I were a farm worker and somebody representing the federal government asked me what my legal status was, I might not tell them.
Right.
Tell them what it really was.
Yeah.
So I I think that 42% could be uh, an underestimate, but we have what we've had for many years, which is a lot of the seasonal workforce in particular for harvesting being people who either came here and have been here a few years, kind of got caught here in the United States. And it's because it's so difficult to go back and forth across the border for them. Or people who came up recently, maybe, um, who are undocumented, and um, this is how they piece a living together, and it's what has developed over the years, over many years, with these jobs that are, you look at cherry harvest for an individual grower, the harvest might only be, 2 weeks to a
Right.
month, maybe at the outside, and or maybe even less, maybe a week. And so it's really intense. It's like psyching up like an athlete, for this harvest, and you get all the cherries off and hope for the best. And it's a gamble. It kind of puts Las Vegas to shame because you have so many things that have to go right. You're gambling, and if it all comes together, you get that good cherry crop.
Yeah.
And one of the factors, of course, is having enough people. Um, so I've read recent accounts of people down in Oregon who are really short and leaving a lot on the trees. Um, I think that's happening everywhere because so many people are unsure if they're here undocumented, and even if they've been here undocumented for a long time, they're hiding. They're
Right.
laying low.
They're fearful.
Yeah, and they don't want to
Yeah.
interact with any anybody in an official capacity, be it the hospital, um, doctors, the utility company, anything, much less law enforcement. So they just avoid going out. And I
Right.
think that's what's happening, what we're seeing.
I think what people probably don't understand is that, okay, you have what I think it's in probably April, May is when the asparagus start. And now that's well, maybe lasts a little bit longer as far as
60-day harvest about.
right, yeah. But when it comes to cherries and soft fruit like cherries, peaches, things like that, cherries in particular, they come on if you have a rain that can screw your crop up pretty well. But also, you just have a real intense amount of time where they're ready and you got to get them out. And I think most people don't really understand that. That what to be able to then in that 2 week period, they got to be harvested then, and you got to have the people to do it.
Yeah, it's very intense, and you got to hit it just right. And if you have even like 30% damage of the cherries, splits from rain,
Right.
that can make it economically infeasible to harvest because sorting them is more costly than what you're going to uh, get in the market. So you just abandon the whole crop. And I think that
Yeah.
that threshold changes a little bit every year, but somewhere around 35% split. So, there are a lot of things that go wrong at the last second.
Yeah.
And so it's also um, a crop where you can get a fairly good return if everything comes together, and for the people who work in the crop, they, if they're skilled at picking, they can do better in cherries than they do in other crops. So, the minimum wage in Washington State's what, 16.67 6, I believe, and the minimum wage for the H-2A program is $19.87 per hour. So that's kind of become the de facto minimum wage. I mean, if you have a farm that's using H-2A next door to you, it's hard to pay less than that. People talk, and so when people are out working on a piece rate in cherries, it's very typical for people to be making 20-30 bucks an hour.
Can you explain that H-2A, basically how that works so people can understand that?
Yeah, sure. It's a temporary visa program that enables agricultural employers to supplement their labor force with people from another country who are foreign nationals, if and only if they can't find enough locals or Americans to uh, do the job and take the jobs. So that means, that's pretty loose definition, but basically anybody who is here in the United States who has documents that appear to be genuine and are, who they say they are, and they show up and present the documents for the I-9 employment verification process that proves that they have the right to work in the U.S. and that proves that they are who they say they are, and then they can continue employment, and that has to be done within 3 days of hiring. But if you can't find enough people through regular recruitment locally and regionally, because you're required to recruit regionally also, then you can be certified, as they call it, by the Department of Labor to hire a certain number of foreign employees. And so you put in an application, say, for, 100 H-2A workers, and say, I think I'm going to need 100 H-2A workers. You start, or 100 workers, and you start recruiting. And if you are unable to recruit enough people, then you are given permission by the U.S. government to hire the foreign people. And then you go through a series of hoops, jump through a series of hoops where you have to get visas for them, you recruit them, you send them contracts, you agree to a pretty lengthy and involved and pretty rock solid contract through the U.S. Department of Labor with each and every person. You have to pay for their transportation, you pay for their visas, you pay for any recruiting activity that happens. They aren't supposed to put out any money except for their passport, basically. You pay for their trip up, you pay for their food on their trip up, you have housing secured for them, you pay for the housing, provide the housing free of charge for them, get them settled in. They're definitely here to work. And a lot of them are people, particularly when the H-2A program first started, were people who had been up here in the past, who just crossed the border looking for work. Now, in the H-2A program, they're legal. They have a visa. They can come across the border like a human being, and I usually either take a bus or fly, and then they can interact in the community. They can, if they're here for 5 or 6 months, for example, during the growing season, they're just like anybody else with a visa, and they can go about their business and recreate in town and do whatever they want if they can get there. But they typically don't have their own transportation, and so the employer has to provide transportation to go grocery shopping.
Yeah, usually a bus or a van. I've seen that, right? And we're not. I mean, we can say that they're crossing the border, but the fact is that we're also talking about people that come from other countries. They're not just coming from, Mexico and Central America.
Well, the vast majority of people are from Mexico because of proximity,
Right.
and because of the long time relationship between the U.S. and Mexico, people have been coming up, and so there's a certain skill level.
Yeah.
A lot of people, say in the state of Michoacan, which is a lot of people have come up from Michoacan. They've come up working for Washington employers for decades, and they know what they're doing. They're valuable because they know what they're doing. But there are employees from Jamaica, for example. Used to be Haiti a little bit, but no longer. They're no longer allowed to come because so many of them were going AWOL because conditions are so rough in Haiti. They didn't want to go back. Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, etc., Honduras. Those countries have really engaged with the U.S. government to build a program so that more people from those Central American countries can come up and work on farms, and to people in countries where they're struggling economically. This is almost a kind of economic development program. They can make $1,000 a week or whatever, and all they have to pay for is food and fun while they're up here. And so if they're up here for, again, say 5 months, which is what, 20 weeks, they might be able to go home with $15,000 in the bank. And you get 100 guys from a small town in Honduras or someplace or Mexico, and they each go back with $15,000 to their hometown. That's transformative.
Right.
They can build houses, dig a well, send their kids to school, what have you. And so I think some countries look at this as a real opportunity to develop economically and get money into their country.
To be able to pick cherries or pick any kind of fruit, even to do, picking especially, to be fast enough. It's hard work, but it's skilled work. I think people don't really get that.
So knowing how to handle the fruit, if we're talking about fruit, knowing how to handle it so you don't damage it and bruise it, knowing how to pick it and take it off of the tree so you don't damage the tree and the buds, future buds, knowing how to manage yourself working outdoors, where you're managing your hydration, you're managing your heat, pacing yourself, you're budgeting your energy as you go through the day. There's that has a big impact on whether you're successful or not. And people who come from the big city, for example, have never really done that and say, "Hey, I want to give it a shot." Those are those, I guess you would call them soft skills that they don't have. They have to pick up, or that they will fail if they don't pick up.
Right.
But I think the skill level of some people have been doing this for a while is so evident, where they can come in like it used to be pretty common for people to come in teams, and they quarter up a tree and they just boom, they're just so good at it, and they made the money that was associated with that skill. They did really well. And so there's still some of that. And as you have H-2A workers who are coming back repeatedly, they develop relationships with the employees, or pardon me, the employers, and they understand the ranch, how the managers want things done, and develop friendships and all that. And so they can come back, and it's a good experience for them and everybody. So
Yeah.
But it's still only, what, 25-30% of the workforce. People talk about, they get obsessed talking about H2A. It's still mostly local people.
Everything seems to be so fluid right now. Uh, we we're hearing about the crackdown, immigration crackdowns in big cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and all of that. Who knows, here in Seattle, that might come along and be more aware and open as it is in those other cities. But in a place like Central Washington, um, you know, where you got business interests. This is agriculture. This is an important part of our economy.
Yeah.
What, I guess, what's happening? Are there raids happening? Are they coming to the fields? What do you know?
Not so far. Over the years, we've had various types of enforcement. Back in 1999, we had this thing called Operation Snowbird, where then it was called the INS,
Yeah.
came in, and they gave they did I-9 audits at all the big fruit warehouses, and they gave a list. I got a list of like 2,700 people that we were supposed to fire. And that, obviously pretty disruptive.
Right.
And as the years progressed, it was a variety of methods where they would, actually do field visits, take, the stereotype of a whole bunch of suburbans coming out to a field, surrounding a
Right.
field, and going into the office, and we're here, we want to talk to everybody. There's not much of that. There hasn't really been much of that. Usually what they do is have a warrant. They're serving a judicial warrant looking for a particular individual or a group of individuals. And on the warrant is listed the places on the property that they're allowed to search. The farmers cooperate with that. They have to. And the um, employees in the field, when ICE agents come out there, um, are subject to questioning. And if the um, enforcement agents feel that there's reasonable suspicion, they may ask them for their documents, start asking them questions, trying to catch them on in the questioning process. And then they have even more suspicion or probable cause, and then pretty soon they're detained. And so they go in looking for one or two people, and they come out with 25. Yeah, and that's pretty typical. And it's incredibly disruptive to the workers. They're people with families typically, and lives here.
Right.
And so, and they typically turn to their employers, and they say, "Oh my gosh, I want you to get my paycheck to my wife, or I want you to call my wife or my kids and tell them what's happening." And, you really have to remember their experience and what they're going through to make sure that they're going to be treated as well as possible. But it's a messy situation that we've been trying to resolve for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
We've had numerous comprehensive immigration reform bills that would provide solutions. There are a lot of different solutions we know of. We have answers to a lot of these problems. It's not like we have to figure out a lot of things, but we've never been able to get there politically.
Right. And see, that's the thing I think that is interesting, because there have been efforts. I think George Bush tried to do it, George W. Bush. Biden had a deal that then was pulled. Politics and the presidential politics and other politics now have already. What I guess that I find real frustrating is that if you think about all of the money that's going through enforcement, you put all of that or the time into trying to actually come up with comprehensive immigration reform, that would be more beneficial to all the interests. rather than doing this other stuff.
I think there's a barrier for a lot of people, a psychological barrier for a lot of people to jump over on this, and that is that uh, the many of the folks who are up here working as undocumented people are, they came in illegally. They did not, or maybe they came in legally and overstayed a visa, or a number of situations. And so they think, well, they shouldn't be allowed. They should be forced to come in legally. They should be forced to do it right, like these other people who have applications pending and so on. But there aren't enough ways for people to come in legally. And so they can't. And so that's the answer to most of those questions or assertions. Um, and I think that there have been some smart people out there looking at this. And I think it was Michael Bloomberg, for example. He was big on immigration, 10 years ago, and had his saying was, we need to make it easier, or we need to make it harder to immigrate illegally, and we need to make it easier to immigrate legally. We need to make it easier for people to come in to work. And I think that's basically the right approach. Obviously, we have a demand for people in a number of industries here. They're great people. They do good work. They're good people to be neighbors with and be around. And it's not um, it's not a stretch to say that they were really instrumental in creating a lot of wealth in this country, in the past several decades. And some of these folks have been here for several decades working, and they're in middle management, in a number of different industries. They're not just uh, manual laborers. And um, I think consideration should be given to um, some pathway to legal status so they can stay here. Their kids are here. They own homes. They own businesses. Um, they're
The American dream, they're contributing to all that.
right, and I understand the resentment that so many people have about them coming in not in a way that wasn't by the book. But as I look at it, in the 90s in particular, I think we had two signs down on the US Mexico border. One said, "Don't enter." The other sign said, "Help wanted." You know?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
people came across, they needed opportunity and so on. And our workforce here in the United States has been uh, otherwise occupied generally. Our unemployment rates very low, around 4%. People who want to work are working, and most of them do not want seasonal jobs. Most of them do not want outside manual labor jobs. Um, so, most of them, uh, people here have been here for a while who are U.S. citizens, speak English and understand the rules of the road and so on. So, if they can get a job where they're indoors and it's going to last all year or most of the year, then they're not going to bend over and cut asparagus,
Right.
or they're not going to um, be in a meat packing plant. Um, that's just how the market works.
So, in the midst of all of this, I think we've had so many things that again, the fluidness of everything. Uh, we've had President Trump says, "Oh, we've got to help our farmers and we've got to do something." And yet we have the mass deportations continuing and the crackdown. We had the agriculture secretary now saying no amnesty for migrants. Adults on Medicaid can replace them in the workplace. What do you think about that?
I saw an interview yesterday with the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, Tom Homan, that they called the immigration czar,
Yeah.
who's been in this immigration enforcement game for a long time and knows the road. Um, and all he could say was, uh, I'm just not going to get ahead of the president. I'm just not going to get ahead of the president on these questions of uh, doing something differently for farm workers or hotel workers, for example, or landscape construction workers. Um, so clearly they're hearing from their constituents um, in those industries. There's an obvious need. There's an obvious need. I mean, to deny the fact that uh, we need people to work who are from outside the country is just complete denial of reality, that there are not enough people in the United States who have legal status who want to do all of the work. So that needs to be done, particularly in manual labor jobs. So how do we do that? How do we get people here to man the machine and get all the work done and create all the economic benefits of all these industries? Um, well, there are a number of ways. One is temporary visa programs, such as the H-2A program. And the H-2A program is very cumbersome and it's expensive. And making that easier to use, making it less expensive to use would really help, because more employers could use it and use it successfully and still make a living. Not every it's not a good fit for every farm, for example. And in fact, you can't use a temporary visa program for, say, dairies, because they have year-round employment generally, and the H-2A program is only for seasonal employment. I think that there will be consideration in the administration of some sort of program that gives at least temporary legal status for people who have been here working who are undocumented. How that washes out, I don't know, because it is a battle, in my opinion. There's a lot of opposition to that. And you hear people like Senator Lee of Utah and others saying, pounding their desks saying, there will be no amnesty. There will be no amnesty. And even Deputy Secretary Homan has said there will be no amnesty. I hope it's not nothing, because that, I think, is a um, recipe for failure and for economic destruction, which I don't think anybody wants.
Yeah.
And so I think that the administration's going to make a move to address this. That I think they're working hard on it. I think there are a lot of people in the administration looking at this and trying to figure it out, but they're battling with people who are very opposed to it, who I think are in denial, saying, "Oh, there are plenty of people in the U.S. now legally to do all these jobs." I don't believe that's true, and I think that's been borne out just by reality over several decades.
Yeah.
So that battle's ongoing. I don't know when they're going to have results for this, but hopefully sometime this year.
Well, the polling is showing that Americans are shifting on some of this because, let's face it, I think there's plenty of fear by some of these actions that are happening, and I think people are wondering, is this really what we want America to be all about?
Yeah, the experience of the individual who endures an enforcement action, I think it's pretty scary and unpleasant.
Yeah.
And so the administration is saying that they're really going after people who have committed crimes, who are undesirable, who pose a threat to safety of America, or even national security. And I'm sure that there's some people out there who are bad actors who are involved in drug trade, human trafficking, whatever. No doubt there are people like that there who need to be taken away. But I think there are a lot of people who have been here for 30 years and had a marijuana conviction when they were 16, or they were had a DUI when they're 20 and now they're 50. They're taking those people too. And that I think you have to stretch to say that they're really a threat to American safety, someone in that kind of situation. But nonetheless, that's part of the target group as I understand it. And I think they in doing so also encounter many other people who they will then question and determine if they think there's suspicion that they may be here on an undocumented basis, and they get swept up into the machine.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of them being in detention for, I really don't know how long, months, very likely, before they get a hearing, before they get transportation back to hopefully their home country and not a third country. Um, and that's very threatening, very disruptive to their lives. Some of them have almost zero connection to the country they were born in because they've been in the U.S. for decades. Yeah, it's a difficult um, it's a difficult thing to navigate, and the administration is trying to make people afraid enough of that, I think, that they voluntarily return to their country. And some of that is happening. Some people are saying, I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
I'm going back to Mexico. I think I have a cousin, or my uncle, or maybe. And so, I've heard of some of that happening, but the the situation on the ground is that we need to have a system that makes sense for legally allowing people into the U.S. to work when and if they are needed. And I think it's very provable that in agriculture and some other industries, they are very needed. And it makes sense. It's good for everybody to make that happen.
You represent the growers, you do lobbying there on their behalf. You're nonpartisan with what you do with the Growers League. But I'm sure you hear about the politics, particularly in Central Washington, having grown up there, which is fairly conservative in that. I'm just wondering what you're hearing from some of the growers about what's happening. They said, well, this isn't what we signed up for, or what are you hearing?
I think they're pretty tense. I think they're waiting for a shoe to drop, the other shoe to drop. And not much has changed in terms of on the ground enforcement on the farm. We haven't seen crews of ICE agents out on farms really any more than in the past. I think everybody's waiting for something like what happened during the Obama administration, which was ICE I-9 audits, which are kind of like a slow motion raid, if you will, where they ask you for all of your I-9s, and then they run that through their databases, and they'll give you a list of people who use false documents, and then tell you a date by which they should be fired. And so then you have to do that, and they'll check to make sure that you fired those people, and then they'll come back and if you have rehired anybody, it's a substantial fine and even jail time. So you can't play with that. It is they're fairly serious violations. So I think at least now, before all this hiring supposedly gets going, uh, that's the kind of action we expect. And everybody, I think, is just kind of tense and waiting for that to happen. But so far, it hasn't happened. With this new bill that just passed, with this, whatever it was, $150 billion in funding, there's going
170 billion.
pardon me.
170 billion, I believe it was. Yeah.
There's got to what's 20 billion.
Yeah, right.
So they're going to um, hire more agents, obviously, be more people out on the street, hire more judges, immigration judges, more people to process uh, uh, things such as I-9 audits, more detention centers. There's going to be a ramp up. How long it will be till we see the effects of that ramp up, I don't know. Typically the federal government moves fairly slowly, but wouldn't surprise me to to see this by beginning of next year, having the enforcement environment being much different than it is today.
Yeah. And regarding that, I mean, is there also tension among the growers about the possibility that we're going to see much more aggressiveness in how they come into the fields? You see that in California already. We see tactical gear, weapons, hood, masked agents, all of these types of things, which, this police state.
Yeah, I think it's not much different, frankly, from what we've seen in the past. And I know there's a lot of fear and hype about it. I think in particular the style and approach, the attitude of the federal government trying to make people take notice and maybe even be a little bit afraid. That's very off-putting, and so um, the fact that in some cases, at least what I've seen, that sometimes people don't feel that the agents have identified themselves, uh, or aren't giving all the due process that's required. I want to be very cautious about making conclusions about that before I know all the facts. And I mean, it really appears that there have been instances in which agents have been cavalier and have done that, and particularly in taking people off the street and not explaining what's going on and so on. And it would be scare the hell out of me, somebody
Me too.
in mass came and didn't, fully identify themselves. I couldn't get a hold of my family for 24 hours and that kind of thing. So I don't know if it's being done on purpose or not, but clearly the process could be improved, probably, to gain credibility with the general population that they're using good, solid law enforcement techniques, that they're following due process. They're not out there trying to be really violent or abusive, but they're just trying to enforce the law. That's what Deputy Secretary Holman says. They are just trying to enforce the law that Congress passed. I heard him say that 4 or 5 times in his interview. But it's how they do that and the impression they leave with the American people, so that people believe that they're being reasonable in the way they do it. That's another thing, and they may have some work to do there, to gain credibility. There's some people who don't want any of this to happen at all, but those laws are on the books, so you can't, until those laws are changed.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
One final thing before we close things up here, and that's the tariffs, which seem to be kind of like a ping pong ball, as far as up and down and not knowing. What's any impact there? Or are the growers worried about that? How does that affect them?
The industry is concerned about tariffs, and it's not my bailiwick really. The um, trade is not, but um, I think the people in the industry who work on that every day, very concerned about following each and every announcement with each and every country and finding a way to negotiate and a way to not let those tariffs impact us too much. I mean, there are some ways that there probably will be some tariffs that catch us and that will destroy markets, but I mean, it's happened in the past, and we don't want to have it happen again. I think people are really concerned, particularly because it's so chaotic. That it's all over the place, very difficult to plan. The people who are involved in trade itself, the logistics of trade, the wholesalers, people who do shipping and so on, or the people who, the wholesalers, they have some real tough decisions to make about whether to, take those financial risks to make commitments, when things could change by 30% overnight. And so, um, yeah, I think everybody, it's not just agriculture. I think everybody in business where they are involved in importing and exporting is on edge about that, trying to figure it out and staying really, really close uh, to officials and to the customers they have in other countries and trying to find ways to make it work. So I can't say that I make generalizations about, it's really bad, it's no problem. It's a major tension that we have to, in a major area of work that we have to pay a lot of attention to. And the people in our industry who are working on that every day, I wish them all the luck in the world because they have a tough job to do.
Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to just, want people to just keep in mind about your industry and what's going on right now?
Well, I think the larger immigration reform issue is something that has to be dealt with. We've been saying that for 30 plus years and trying to do it. It would really be to the benefit of the United States to to change our immigration system so that um, there's more integrity to the process. We have had mandatory use of e-verify at the time of hire proposed in every immigration reform bill that we've worked on over the last 30 years, which would add a lot of integrity to the system because you'd screen people out at the time of hire. Right now, it's not mandatory. Um, and that sounds good on one side of the equation, but unless you change other parts of the equation, like creating other ways for people to come into the country to get work or changing and reforming the temporary visa programs such as H-2A so that more people can use them and they're easier and cheaper to use and they work for people, they're adequate protections and so on for employees. Unless you do that, concentrating on the enforcement and on uh, the verification process of documents will throw everything out of whack and it'll just destroy a lot of things economically. So it has to be done at the same time. That's why it's called comprehensive immigration reform, because you're dealing with both sides of the equation at the same time. And politically, it is a difficult thing to do. but it really has to be done. And I'm really hoping that people in the United States can support that.
Yeah, let's fix the system. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. Let's stay in touch, see how things go this summer. Who knows, in a month, things might be wackier, or maybe they won't be. We'll see, I guess.
I'll buy some cherries.
Yeah, I will. All right.
Support the market.
There you go. Yes, do that. All right. Thank you, Mike Gempler. All right.
The Chino y Chicano podcast is available on your favorite podcast provider.
You can watch the video version on YouTube and Converge Media, a leading producer of culturally relevant content in the Pacific Northwest. We'll talk more later.